All right, for today's lecture, we are going to talk about some hypotheses we have for Lab 3 on high temperature superconductors, and we're also going to look at some of the properties we expect those high temperature superconductors to have. So first, let's talk about the hypotheses. So for this year's lab, we have two main experimental parameters that we are adjusting. The first one is binder additions. And so this year we are adding PEG, polyethylene glycol, and its molecular weight is 3350. So it's PEG 3350. So we're using this as our binder, and we're adding this to the YBCO before we dry press to make our pellets. And so I've set this as one of our conditions. So we're using varying amounts of this PEG 3350. And so, see the all the data we have up on the share drive if you want to have more information on this. But and you can also look at some readings that I've put in our folder. So it's in the supplemental reading section of Lab 3. There is a chapter from the Modern Ceramic Processing book that's on pressing, and they talk some about binder additions. So, look at that. Look at other resources on and then our past lecture that we talked about binder additions, and see if you can come up with a hypothesis or a series of hypotheses of what the effect is going to be on our YBCO, right? I want you to come up with what you think that's going to happen. So, for example, is it going to have an effect on the green part? So the before centering, is it going to have an effect on the centered YBCO? So will it affect green strength, green density, the centered density? Will it affect some of the superconducting properties or any other thing you can think of? So I want you to think about these hypotheses, do some reading about the presence of binders, and what that has, and see if you can come up with a hypothesis for this experiment. We are using, again, PEG. We're varying the amounts from 0 up to 10 weight percent. So, let me know what you think this is going to have. And so, so that everybody sort of gets to participate in this and share their hypotheses at this stage. And they can change if you read more about this. But what I'll have you do, and I'm going to go over here to the actual document, is go to our share Google Drive for this class, and you'll find a document called MSE407, spring 20, and then lecture 9, and it's called hypotheses. So open up this file, and basically you're going to fill out the hypotheses that you have for this experiment. So I went ahead and re-put in the design matrix for the lab. And then basically all you're going to do is come down here, type in your name, and then put in what you think the hypotheses of this experiment are going to be. I put sort of a dummy one here just to sort of get you started on the format, but be as specific as you can. Think about all elements of the lab that we're going to cover. So use that and see. Write down your hypotheses. So this doesn't necessarily have to be what goes into your lab report later on, but it gets you thinking about what effects these will have. So make sure you do this as you're going through these videos for lecture 9. Okay, so let me get back to the slideshow here. So we've talked about the addition of binders. So that is one of the variables that we are changing. The other one is during centering. Right? So we're adding binders, and part of that, like I mentioned in the last lectures that we had, typically when we do that, we would also add a step to the centering program to burn off or remove the binder additions or any other sort of organics that may be in the sample. So that's the other variable we have. And so for each of the additions of binder, we're going to fire them or center them with those two conditions. One, sort of a standard program that we have, and then one where we've added a protocol for binder burnout. And so just let me go over that real quick. So that program, the one without a binder burn off step, what that does is it starts by ramping up from room temperature, or whatever temperature the furnace is at, up to 950 degrees Celsius, very close to the calcination temperature. And it does so at a rate of 10 degrees per minute. So relatively quick for what we're going to see later. After that, it holds at that temperature for 6 hours. So that's our isothermal hold. And then after that, after the 6 hours, it will furnace cool back to near room temperature so that we can actually handle them. And so that's governed by how quickly the heat can be removed from the furnace. So that's kind of our standard centering protocol that we have. So the other way that we're going to fire these, and so these will be from your third lab session if you're following along with all of the data, will be the same pressed samples with the same amount of binder, but the sintering program will add the binder burned off step. And so in this case, how we do that, and the specifics for our binder burn off step, are going to be that we're going to go from room temperature to 500 degrees Celsius, and it's going to do that at 1 degree per minute. So you can see the rate is 10 times slower. So once it gets to that 500 degrees, it's going to hold there for 2 hours before ramping up to the final isothermal temperature at 950 at the sort of normal rate of 10 degrees per minute. And then that's going to be the same from there. So that we're going to have another 6 hour hold, and then we're going to furnace cool back to room temperature. So the idea here is that we're going to see what the effect of this binder burn off. We should obviously from the previous lectures have an idea of what this does, but based on that knowledge, we're going to formulate a hypothesis, and then through the data, we're going to see what actually happens. So I want you to come up with what you think is going to happen, and try to also think about the other properties as well that we'll talk about and what effect that will have on this. So same thing, what effect is this binder burn off step going to have on the centered YBCO? So is it going to affect density, superconducting properties, or etc.? And then same thing, go back to that Google Doc for lecture 9 and submit your answers.